Hi, my name is Nooper, and I'm the managing partner of Fact Professional. We're a full-service CPA firm, and I'm here today with...
Hi, my name is Asia Ghazi. I am actually a training coordinator at a software company here in Torrance, but during my side gig, I also do human resources and organizational leadership consulting.
Yes, awesome. Well, we're here today because, I have a team, and I'm wondering how we're going to plan for all of the changes that are coming up when we go back to the office. But I have clients who have a lot of questions as well. So let's get started. I'm sure I'm going to have a ton of questions that I will not ask off to the side, and I'll ask you, so that way everybody gets some good information.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Give me just a second while I get this up and running. Okay. There we go. Ask an HR and organizational leadership strategist. So that's your full title.
Yeah, that is. It's a long title. Aside from the title I have at my job, yeah, that's a long title.
Right. No, for sure. So one of the things that, we're recognizing, and I'm sure you're feeling it on your end because you're working remotely as well, is that in a post-COVID world, we're going to see a lot of changes that we weren't even ready for, I think, as a society in some ways. So, right. So one of the things obviously is tech savviness and, being flexible. That's one thing that I've been telling my team, is that they need to learn to be flexible. Over communication, that's something that's really important. Expanding their understanding of the industry knowledge. They don't depend on everybody as much. So these are some of the things that I was looking at and thinking that these are the changes that we're really going to see. And I'd love to hear your feedback on that and see, throughout this, so that we can see how everybody can plan for their team and how to build their team.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of the stuff that you even mentioned here, like emotional intelligence and data literacy, there's going to be so much more tech. I mean, It's going to be crazy.
Right. Because all these tools, they kind of make us more efficient. When we're not in the workplace with each other, we can't just go and be like, hey, what is going on with this? How do we handle this? So implementing some of these tools will become really critical in the next, I think, 6 months.
I think in the next 10 years, we're going to, I mean, if you think about it, like, didn't 2020 just start off with like this huge change we weren't even ready for? Exactly. It's like the decade came in saying, no, this is a decade of change.
Yes. Yeah. It's a little too much change, but again, we're lucky to be working. So this is something a lot of my clients have asked. You go for it.
Yeah. Okay. Furlough versus layoff. See, this is really a big topic, because there's a lot of people that are getting furloughed, a lot of people that are getting laid off from their positions for various reasons within the COVID-19 pandemic. And mostly it leads because the companies are either trying to save money, or maybe the companies are going downhill because the economic impact of this pandemic has just been, it's been really horrible. I mean, I'm driving down, Hawthorne, and I see Burlington Coat Factory and all these, and they're all emptied out. And you're thinking, what's going on? It is. It's really scary. So what is the difference between being furloughed and being laid off?
Yeah.
If you're being told by an employer, hey, we're going to be furloughing you for right now because of this pandemic, what it means is that you're still technically employed, but now you're going to have reduced hours, right? So it's basically an unpaid leave of absence. And for example, my aunt, her son was working in the airport. He works at LAX. A couple of other cousins work at the LAX airport, and they were told that they were going to be furloughed, meaning that their hours are going to start getting reduced each day until they were at 0.
Oh, man.
And so now they're not working, but they're furloughed, and you can have the furlough 30 to 60 days. But there's obviously a lot of issues even behind that, right? But that's pretty much what being furloughed means. But then when you're laid off, obviously that means your employment is terminated and you're no longer considered an employee. And so when that happens, that's the time to run over to the unemployment office and start, putting those claims in for unemployment, because, at this point you're not guaranteed a position at that company. Either the company couldn't, had to lay off a lot of people, and we've had massive layoffs, because of bankruptcy or other things. And I know there are some companies right now, some big name companies that are filing for bankruptcy because of the pandemic and the effects of it.
Right. Well, so when you're furloughed, so this is something that, I was doing a little bit of reading, not as much as knowledge as you have on this one, but when you are furloughed, then you're really kind of in a similar position as being laid off, but you're expected to come back. That's really the key difference there. Yeah.
Exactly. You're not
Yeah.
being paid. That's the thing. It's an
Right.
unpaid leave of absence. But,
Right.
it's for a period of time until the company can, come back on its feet. But just because you're furloughed doesn't mean you could get it back, because if something happens and the company decides to do massive layoffs, you
Yeah.
could also get included in that. And so now you went from being furloughed to being laid off. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of these issues that, we've got to really look into taking care of.
Yeah. Good point. All right. Perfect. Then let's move on to our next topic, which is sick pay. I think that with sick pay, because we're seeing a situation where obviously if you are sick, we want people to go home. We don't want them to stay in the office. I was joking with my team because we're thinking of doing temperature checks and,
Yeah.
to get like a contactless thermometer. Now, I'm not a nurse and it would be very uncomfortable in some ways to be monitoring my team's health in that context, but I know that that's very critical. So what's your perspective on and what's your opinion on how to handle that?
Yeah, honestly, here's the thing. Like you said, people first, economic second. Don't think so much about the economic impact. We're already all impacted by it. I
Right.
think what we really need to do is focus on the human aspect of it, right? I mean, if you have sick pay and you're sick, you know someone is sick, take advantage of that. Take the time off. There's laws in place. Here in LA, I think the mayor has already announced we've got, the sick pay available. I mean, if you need to take that extra time, take it.
Right.
And I think even today I was watching the news and Governor Newsom was saying that he's extended the sick pay workers compensation. Actually, he's given out workers compensation to the front lines and food workers. So he's extending that, so you can get workers comp if you're sick and you need to stay home or whatever the situation is. But we really need to be humanistic. Our health and well-being is important, honestly. I mean, I was telling my manager today. You and I were discussing this before the video, and I was telling my manager today, you've got to have a work-life balance, because he was like, I'm always working. I'm working 12 hours a day. I'm working
Yeah.
more than I did before. Which, side note, if you're working remotely from home, you're probably noticing a higher level of productivity. So which means you're working more hours. And
Right.
I told him, I'm like, your health and well-being is more important, because the emails, the clients, the jobs are going to stay. But what's going to happen to you?
Right. That's
So
very true. And I think, I think that we have another slide on this, but it's very true that well-being in terms of respecting yourself, respecting the time that you need, still allocating that time for breaks and everything else that we're used to having naturally throughout our day is so
yeah,
critical, because if you don't do that, you're in some ways you're going to burn yourself out. And I'm notorious for working for hours on end and liking that feeling of just sitting there. And my team is good about reminding me, hey, you need to take a break, you need to have lunch, you need to get out there. But I think that when you're not around other people, you forget to do that. So that's a
yeah,
really good
yeah.
point.
Oh yeah, exactly. And so you really have to, and I think because we're working individually, solo, sometimes we're not really with our team. It's easy for us to just like carry on with our work and not say, oh, let me get up and get a coffee break, or because my colleagues and I would just walk over to Coffee Bean across the street from work.
Right.
And now that we're at home, that's not happening. So we
Yeah.
really have to think about these things. And I really do think employers should consider relaxing the rules, at least for now or for the remainder of this year, for sick pay, vacation, and hours, because you don't know when someone's going to get sick. So maybe
Right.
extending extra sick days and giving a little bit of extra vacation pay could work. I mean, you just have to figure out how to relax these rules, but that's going to work also in tandem with our policies that we have in place, legally with the EEOC.
Well, so that's a big question that I kind of have, is that do you so one thing that, obviously a lot of employers with sick pay,
Yeah.
they usually say, I need a doctor's note. I have to have a doctor's note. Do you think that employers should relax that a little bit now, because of this COVID situation? Or do you think it should stay the same?
I think that's a good idea. My this is this. I still think you should get some kind of a note if you are sick. If you're sick, or if someone is sick, especially with this pandemic, with the virus, if someone in your household has caught COVID-19, you've got to let your employers know, right?
Yeah.
So I think having a doctor's note is still important. I don't There are certain rules that really we can't really relax, because documentation reasons, right? We need to document the reason why you're out. So
Mhm.
even if someone's leaving for vacation pay, or if they're, they're trying to get a vacation, or they're sick, maybe not necessarily with COVID, but with something else, documentation is going to be important, because it depends on the type of sick pay you would be eligible for
Right.
with the new rules that have just come out.
That's an interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. Very true. Well, and I try to be pretty flexible when it comes down to sick pay in our office, but I do think that my fear is that, if somebody is asymptomatic, I would be afraid to have them in the office.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how we're going to attack that in itself, if we're not able to do real testing.
Yeah.
What do you think is a good way to kind of handle that in terms of, or is there any way to handle that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, yeah, it's something that's caught us all off
Yeah.
like, it caught us off guard. We're like, what in the world are we supposed to do? I mean, here's the thing: we don't know who's asymptomatic and who's not, right? And sometimes we kind of take that risk. We let someone come in to work, and then maybe something happens, and all of a sudden now, somebody got sick within that same department, or something happened, and who do we really put that on? We can't really do that either. So, I mean, I guess the general rule of thumb would be, if you are feeling sick, or if you know somebody who had caught the virus and they happen to be close to you, whether you get it or not, just make sure just to let everyone know, hey, someone in my family caught it, and I just want to
Yeah.
stay home. I just want to, like, make sure I'm okay.
Right. Right.
I mean, really, we can't get thermometers and start like poking our heads with those. That's the
Well, yeah, exactly. And that's, you want to be safe, but at the same time, it's like, to what degree, and how is it? I'm also in the thought process that I shouldn't be afraid as an employer to breach that comfort, because maybe it's not making the other person feel comfortable, but at the same
yeah,
time, it's making everybody feel safe.
yeah,
So that's one thing that I'm curious about from an HR perspective is, am I crossing any boundaries, and by keeping the team safe? So, we talked about mental health and safety, but am I
yeah,
crossing any boundaries by pushing the team to, or, by trying to check somebody's temperature? Because I've heard people who were in more commercial big buildings, and they do temperature checks in and out of the building all day.
yeah,
So
that
is
too.
that okay? Is that standard?
I mean, right now with this virus, I guess it's becoming a thing. I wouldn't really, here's my thing: I don't want that to become a standard. I don't want us to have to go to the office every day having to get our temperatures checked back and forth just because we're facing the virus. I mean, at some point, we have to have that sense of normalcy coming into the office. Otherwise, I'd rather just work from home, right? And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
and it's kind of interesting. I kind of brought that in with the mental health and safety, right? Because what can we put in place for mental health? And I think, so at my job, actually, so we have ADP. That's who we work with for HR,
Mhm.
and ADP actually has provided us with 9 hours of free mental health counseling, which I thought was just amazing, because, and it's paid by our company, and I think that's great, because if you're going to have your temperature checked in and out, how is that going to mentally affect you and the rest of the people working in the company, right? I mean, it's going to make people so uneasy, even if you're trying to make them feel safe. It's going to make them feel so
Yeah.
uneasy, and we don't want that, right? So we've got to find a way where we can gauge, how our team is doing, how our employees are doing. And I think one of the ways is to talk to them, just to say, hey, how's it going? What's going on with you? Are you okay? How's your family? Be open to, like, ask them, be communicative with them, and let them know that they've got a safe place to talk, because right now we're all going through a time where we're kind of isolated and lonely, right? And
Right.
we're using Zoom basically as a way to start, to stay in touch with people, but it's not the same as getting an actual hug or getting a cup of coffee, right?
Yeah.
So, it's really, right now, managers and leaders need to ensure that their staff is doing well, and just take precautions. I mean, it's going to take precautions, but
Right.
I honestly, I don't want people to feel like, okay, now I'm going to get my temperature checked every day, and what if I'm up by 1 degree? Then you're going to send me home? You know what I mean?
Right, and that's another question is, if the employer chooses to send the employee home, would that day be considered paid, or do they have to take their sick? Is there something that you have to enforce on that end as the employer, and what should the employee expect? Because
Yeah,
that's something that is, I mean, again, if you have a team of, we have a team of about 15 in the office, and my fear is that if one person is sick, I don't want to put the rest of them in jeopardy. But I also don't want them to feel like, because they're sick, or because we're worried that they're sick, that, we have to send them home. What's the best way to approach that as a policy?
yeah, That's a great question, and it's definitely a fine line because you definitely don't want that employee to feel bad for having been sent home
Yeah,
because they're sick. But one of the things that, well, first of all, if they came to work and they reported to work, right?
yeah.
And they, let's say, because okay, so this happened to me. I was actually at work for 4 hours back in February. I got really sick. I was sick for like a week. I have no idea where that came from. I've never been sick, and no, it was not COVID.
It's just something
Okay,
else. Yeah. It's
there have been
also the
people.
flu season, everything else is happening at this time. So it could be a lot
Exactly.
of things.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, people have been like, "Oh, are you sure it wasn't COVID? Because it came before January." And I'm like, "Trust me."
Yeah.
I've gotten sick 3 times in the last year just because sometimes stress can make you sick and all these other things. Now, I got sick back in February, and I came to work one day. I took 2 days off, and I came to work, and I was coughing, and I think somebody went and complained to the COO, and then she started slacking me, and she said, "Are you okay? How are you doing?" And I said, "I'm really sick to come to work because I didn't want to miss out on, the work I'm doing. And she said, "No, no, no. If you're not feeling well, go home." And so it's really up to the employee to choose if they want to use that day as a sick day, or what they can also do is they can ask if they can work from home. So if you're feeling sick,
Right.
and you can't really afford to take the day off, maybe ask your manager, or the managers who are, or the executives who are in charge, ask them, like, is it okay for me to work from home? Because when I asked her, can I work the rest of the day from home, she said that was fine. So I received her permission. I went home. I took care of the rest of the stuff I needed to take care of,
Hmm.
sitting in bed, coughing and hacking, but I got it done.
Right.
So that's my thing, is make it a policy that it is going to be up to the employee. You can't force the employee to take the day off.
That's what I was
And
kind of wondering is
yeah,
can you be
you
like,
can't.
nope, you're sick. You got to go home. Too bad. If you do that, you still have to pay the employee out for the day.
Exactly. And
And you
and if they
can't
have
tell them you have to take a sick day then. That's the employee's
exactly
choice. Yeah.
exactly if they have sick days available and they want to use that sick day and it's paid, then do it. Then they can take that paid sick day and take the day off and be okay. But I mean, if
Yeah.
this is somebody, because there are a lot of think about it, there's a lot of employees that need to be at work 5 days a week because they have some really crucial tasks to take care of. And
Right.
if they're not able to take care of it because they're sick for one day, then sending them home might not be conducive to the productivity of your employees. But if you're able to say, go, you can work from home, and give them that flexibility that they can stay home, they can take care of themselves,
Hmm.
they can still be in bed in their pajamas, and they can still open up their laptops and work, then I think that will be okay. Again, it's up to the employee. The employer cannot force you to, take a paid leave. Like of course, the employer will tell you to go home. My employer told me, she said, it would probably, do you want to go home? Maybe it would be a better thing for you to go home. She didn't force me at all,
Yep.
but I had wanted to go home. And so when she said that, I said, I'll take that advantage. And since she said I can work from home, I'm going to do that. So I spent my 4 hours doing that from
Yeah.
home. But, these are things that you have to discuss with your manager. And every company has its own policies and procedures.
Well, I
So
was
I
going
would
to say
definitely,
if you're in a situation where you can't work from home, right? And that's the case for, I mean, we're
yeah,
we're very blessed that we have the ability to do that, but there's so many people, who are not able to take that. So I do think that a lot of people feel pressured to go back to work, especially in the next 1 to 2 weeks, when things start to open back up. So that's where I'm kind of curious is obviously if the employer can't send you home, then you can continue to work, but it's up to your own discretion in terms of, I guess it's a
yeah,
moral, it's a moral and ethics kind of thing
yeah,
now, isn't it?
exactly. Well, but and that's the thing. So if for example, people in the front lines right now, they're sick. They need to stay home.
They
They
do,
they
yeah.
can't afford to
It's
infect
hard
anyone
though.
with the virus. Yeah. So sometimes if you have, again, like I said, it depends on your industry, your company, where you're working. And I think, like, for example, our healthcare industry, if they've got people who are sick and the doctors are sick or the nurses are sick, yeah, they're
Yeah.
gonna have to stay home. There's really no choice. Stay home.
Mhm.
You'll get paid if but stay home. And whatever your policy is, if your company provides you 2 weeks of sick pay, which technically you should have 2 weeks of sick pay, paid at your regular amount. So we're gonna talk about that later as we move
Yep.
on, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
But
yeah, definitely. Well,
you
and you
know,
were saying ADP, I think Paychex also, a lot of these companies, they
yeah,
provide those online tools
yeah,
for and it's great that your company offers that. But I think I always tell my team, because we have Headspace in the office, is that take this time to meditate, take a few minutes, take your breathers, because it is very helpful, and it's not just good for the employee, it's also good for the employer, because an employee that's happier, that's healthier, they're always going to be more productive. But I think it's so critical to use those online tools.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, when it comes to your mental health and safety, use those online tools. If you're going through a lot of issues right now mentally, like I said, we have our provider provided us 9 hours of free mental health counseling. Our employer is paying for it, but I know that's not, the case for every employee and every employer. So take some of the virtual mental health programs. I mean, there's Talkspace, there's BetterHelp. They do take a nominal fee, but if you think about it, you can use that as a way to communicate, to talk about what you're going through and what you're feeling, and hopefully they'll help you out, because right now it's a really crucial time that we have that connectivity in that space to talk to others and really build up our own immune system so we don't get sick. But if we are feeling sick, we should stay home. We should not be at work. And I mean, that's something that we're really telling people and really enforcing. It might not be a mandatory enforcement. And again, it can be up to the employee that they want to do either work from home or whatever. But, for those people who can't, if you're working in a grocery store, if you're in the front lines, in a hospital, in a nursing home, you're not going to be able to work from home. So in that case, take the time off, recuperate, get yourself better, because you don't want your patients, you don't want other people around you to be sick. Because then they're not going to be able to do their job. So out of the courtesy is what we're really asking.
Yeah. Good point. All right. So these policies, favorite topic, because I love writing policies at the office. But there's a lot of policies and procedures that are going to come into place, and you're really good about kind of elaborating on some of the more administrative side of those things. So I'd love to hear about your opinion on those.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Families First Coronavirus Response, so there's a poster available for this that if people want, so if you wanted to get the labor law poster for this, you can get it. You can actually email the poster to your employees, because if we're all working from home, we don't necessarily have the poster to put up in our workplace. But I would definitely, so I would definitely say email the poster and also stick it up on your office so that when people do come back, that is still there. So just a quick, run through on what the FFCRA stands for. It applies to fewer than 500 employees, and it's only for medical leave due to COVID-19. So it's directly related to COVID-19. This was just, I think this was put in in March, right when we were all being told to stay at home. They have done this. And so basically you can get your 2 weeks of sick leave at your regular pay if you are quarantined. So, or 2 weeks of sick leave at 2/3 the amount of pay. So all of this equals 80 hours, right? 80 hours for both. You can get 2 weeks. Now, if there's a bona fide need to care for someone who's sick or quarantined due to COVID-19, and you need to receive an additional 10 weeks, then you can do that if you have a child. And again, that's at 2/3 of your employee's regular pay. If you work 30 days and you can't work because you have a sick child or a sick care provider, the child is sick, they can't go to the child care provider, or they're closed, or the schools are closed because of COVID-19, and you don't have a choice but to stay at home and be quarantined and take care of your child, then you can have those extra 10 weeks. So it's either either you get your 2 weeks of regular pay if you're quarantined for 2 weeks, or at the 2/3 amount you can get your 2 weeks of sick leave if you have to care for somebody else who's also quarantined, and then you can add the 10 weeks on top of that.
Interesting.
Yeah,
that's really that's amazing that they're doing that, but man, that's going to affect employers in an interesting way. We have to think about both sides, right? So it's amazing that they've created that situation, and it's great that they put that in place, but it's definitely going to be something employers have to be aware of.
Oh, absolutely. Because right now, I mean, the schools are still closed. I know that they're reopening parts of the country again, but schools are still closed. A lot of the child care providers are not open. So where are you going to put your child, and what if your child is sick, right? So you want to make sure that, they're taken care of. And if you're going to be able to use those 10 weeks, then take advantage of it now. But now going forward in the future, if there is another coronavirus again, which I hope doesn't happen anytime soon in our lifetimes, at least, I think having this pandemic once is enough for all of us.
No kidding.
Right. It's a good idea to keep your family's first response, act in place, and even to create your own, put in some other policies and procedures, because now's the time for you to revise your policies and procedures for emergencies and disasters, and update your handbooks with the latest current legal policies in place. And I'm going to tell you all this too, is that please make sure you have legal counsel representing you. Even when we were talking about the furloughs versus the layoffs, and I wanted to mention this at that time too, so I'm going to quickly go back to that. When you were talking about what should an employer do in this situation, retain legal counsel. You know,
Yeah.
if you're gonna,
Yeah.
if you're
Very good
gonna,
point.
yeah, if you're gonna terminate an employee, if you're gonna furlough an employee, make sure they know what their rights are and you know what your rights are, and make sure it's done in a way that is non-discriminatory and where you can make sure that everything is documented fully and professionally. If you do everything without that, you're gonna be in so much trouble later on, because they can come back. The former employee or the furloughed employee can come back and say, well, I'm going to file an adverse claim, an adverse employment claim, because I feel like I was being discriminated against. Why was I the one being told to leave and not, come to work? And, so those are important. And then also, if you have a unionized workforce, things are very different in how you are able to furlough or lay people off. And there's definitely certain procedures you have to go through, because I have friends who are in the union and they're like, nope, they can't fire us. It's like, what's we got to figure things out. So even with the Families First, the Coronavirus Response Act, your policies and procedures, updating your handbook, just make sure you know all the legal policies in place, and make sure you've retained legal counsel, especially one who is pretty much an expert in employment law, to help you with making sure that you have everything covered. You don't want to have someone coming back at you saying anything about you, firing somebody, terminating somebody, furloughing somebody, and then saying, oh, well, you discriminated against me, because that's a huge deal and you don't want to get yourself in trouble. And definitely I would say for the labor law posters, that's necessary. So again, email the labor law posters that you have currently to your employees so that they have that in email. It's also documented that you let everybody know what the labor laws are.
Right, where you actually made that effort to go out there and let them know. So that's interesting. Yeah.
Exactly, because you don't want them to be like, oh, I didn't know that was a policy, or I didn't know that was a no. Now you know. You can't come back and say you didn't know. So we want to make sure that's happening. And definitely check the EEOC website. I recommend that, because if you have the EEOC website on, you can stay up to date. And if you're on that website, you can stay up to date with the latest laws, the rules, procedures. I think also there's another website, dol.gov. They also have updates, and actually have the dol.gov. Yes, so they have the pandemic updates right now on the Families First Coronavirus Response. So if you want to know if you're covered, if you're an employer, if you want to know if how this policy affects you, visit those sites, because you'll get a lot of information.
Interesting. That's really good information.
One other thing I did want to say too is, along with the posters, a lot of our HR associations are doing webinars. So if you are part of an HR association, if your company has an HR department that's part of SHRM, Society of Human Resources Management, or PIRA, Professionals in Human Resources Management, or the other national human resources associations that are available, check them out. They have webinars going on right now on how to deal with COVID-19 responses, how to deal with, all these policies and procedures, things that we're talking about. So I would definitely recommend you checking them out.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's so much helpful information in those webinars. I mean, I feel like I'm relying on them more than ever before, because a lot of the information is kind of being deciphered, and after the information is kind of sorted through, then they're going on those webinars and giving the most important points. So that's a great tip there, to use the webinars, use the online resources. And a lot of them are free right now, which is amazing. So why not use that?
Right, exactly.
Right.
I think PIRA has made it where you can get 90 days of free membership from them right now.
Oh, wow.
So take advantage of that. Yeah.
PIRA.com.
PIHRA.
Okay. Good to know. That's very helpful. Yeah. All right. Well,